Okay, so I think we'll make a start. So firstly, big welcome to our brand new webinar, which is a product walkthrough of our latest product launch, Linear Generation 2. My name's Callum Ryder. I'm the market manager at Raytec. I'll be taking you through today's webinar. I'm also joined by Andy Oliver, who will join us later towards the end of the webinar. He's one of our regional sales managers. He'll be tackling on your questions that you may have during the Q&A at the end. So just a couple of housekeeping rules. As I mentioned, Q&A at the end. So there is a question section on your control panel where you can ask your questions and type them out to us. And we'll leave some time for that at the end. Please feel free to ask those questions as we go through, as they're fresh in your mind. And like I say, we'll have some time and hopefully tackle as many of those as we can at the end of the webinar. So look forward to doing that. But we'll crack on and go through the start just by looking at what we're actually going to cover in today's webinar. So as I said, it's a walkthrough of our newest product, Linear Generation 2. We'll look at the new features and benefits of the new products and what those mean in terms of the new opportunities that the improved product brings, as well as things like cost savings and how it can benefit you as an end user. We look at the new industrial variants which we've released as part of the launch. And then we'll take a little step back and look at the general rule of specifying a linear and some of the key considerations you should be taking into account when specifying any linear product. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we'll leave some time at the end for questions. So without further ado, we'll just start by looking at possibly the first question you might have. Why have we developed a second version or a second generation of our linear product? So the existing linear is the most popular product in the Spartan range, and we believe a very good product. But we always focus on continuous improvement at Raytec, and we strive to make the products the best they possibly can be. And with this in mind, we wanted to build and improve on Linear's most important key features, the things that mattered most to our customers and the people who use the product. And this led us to do a comprehensive review, looking at various areas such as the physical design of the product, performance, and then also the range as a whole, and really so we can make sure that there's a linear product suitable for any application, wherever it may be in terms of geography as well. So we look at each of these areas in a bit more detail as we go through the presentation in terms of what we've actually done and what we've changed with the product in each of these areas. So start with that first point, then the physical design. So the new linear is more robust, more durable, and more heavy duty than ever before. This is largely down to a redesigned front lens. We'll look at what's actually changed in the next slide, but the headline figures are that the new linear has twice the impact rating of the previous version. It's more resistant to chemical attack, and that's all backed up by an IK 10 rating. So the headline figures of what's changed with the new linear in terms of durability and being robust. So how have we achieved that? We'll take a little bit of a closer look now. So you can see from the bottom right image on the screen that the lens is now secured using a new clamping system. This means that the lens is no longer screwed directly onto the fitting, which you can see from the side-by-side comparison of the old and the new lens at the top right, with the two lenses there. And it was around the screw holes on the old version of the lens where damage or cracks were most prone on the existing version. So taking them out of the design removes the stress points and allows that improved impact rating and that improved resistance to chemical attack as well. Another added benefit of the new design with using this clamping system is that it eradicates the chance of dust or dirt from being trapped beneath the screw holes. Really, that's purely a cosmetic issue, has no impact on the hazardous rating of the product, but nevertheless, it's a definite improvement over the existing version as well. Another big driver behind the project has been to maximize performance from the new linear. So we've addressed this on two fronts. One is to get more power out of the luminaires. So we have the WL168 variant, which is your traditional 4-foot or a 2x36 watt fluorescent replacement. That's now providing up to 7,000 lumens. The WL84 variant, your traditional 2-foot or your 2x18 watt replacement, is now at 3,500 lumens, which is a big jump from the Generation 1 version of the product. As well as providing the product with more power, we also wanted to make them more efficient than ever before as well. So the new linear is fitted with an all-new, brand new driver, which means it has an efficacy of 142 lumens per watt on the Zone 2 variant, slightly less on the Zone 1, which is 133 lumens per watt. But nevertheless, these are figures which we believe to be industry leading. Just a small caveat to that, to say that the driver upgrade at the moment applies only to standard variants, but there will be upgrades to the emergency versions in the coming months as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Another new feature, and something we'll talk about quite heavily in this presentation, is the introduction of a choice of new optics. So we will look at the benefits of what these new optics mean in more detail over the next few slides. But in a nutshell, they're ideal for aisle, corridor, perimeter type applications. It will mean that linear is far more flexible and better suited for a wider range of applications than it ever has been before. We've also made some improvements to the light distribution on the standard beam pattern on the Zone 1 variants. So we've redesigned the light engine to ensure there's no cut off from the potting or the encapsulation, which is around the LEDs. So overall, the light distribution on this new Gen 2 version has been enhanced and improved over what we had on the Generation 1 version. So the first example of the benefits which the new optics provide, as well as that increase in power, is how Linear Gen 2 allows you to use fewer luminaires across the site and ultimately saves cost. So here we've got a fairly standard application on a 14 by 14 meter square. So using the existing version of Linear, which you can see on this design on the screen at the moment, we've got a design utilizing 20 luminaires, which consumes a total of 678 watts across the installation, achieving an average of 165 lux on the ground. So if we now compare that to the new Generation 2 Linear, under the same conditions, we only need 16 luminaires, and that's despite using fewer fittings. So going from 20 to 16, we've actually got more light on the ground with an average of 182 lux. So in addition to the improved performance, there'll also be a significant cost saving, both in terms of consumption. So there's a 45% reduction in consumption. That's thanks to that new, more efficient driver, plus the fact that we need fewer fittings across the installation, and also a capital saving of around 17%. And obviously for larger installations where we have more fittings on site, more luminaires, these savings will grow and be of greater value to the user and to the site. So that's certainly a big benefit of the increase in power and the new optics. I think what we're trying to say here is the overall message is fewer luminaires, more light on the ground, big cost savings. Another benefit is the ability to increase the height at which Linear is mounted at. And this is largely down to the increase in power which it now delivers. This time we've got 9 fittings installed in a 18 meter square room. On the left hand side is the old version of Spartan Linear WL168, and on the right the same size product but the Gen 2 version. Equivalent sizes, but the difference between the two designs, which you can probably see on the designs there, is that we have the Gen 1 luminaire mounted at 6 meters and the Gen 2 mounted at 10 meters. So if we go to the next slide, we can see the results of that a bit more clearly. So we can see here that the two solutions, despite Gen 2 being mounted at 4 meters higher than Gen 1, they're actually achieving more or less identical results. And they're actually both achieving around 105 lux on the ground, and with identical uniformity ratings too. So this ability to mount Linear Gen 2 at greater heights without compromising on performance brings a lot of new opportunities, and it actually brings the performance of Linear into the territory of a low bay fitting, with the advantages on top of just having similar performance, but also being more cost effective than a low bay type fitting would be, as well as being readily available with emergency battery backup as well. So we feel that this will be a kind of solution which will be of a lot of interest to our customers. For the next benefit, again focus on those optics that I want to look at, is the great level of flexibility which Linear Gen 2 provides and how it's suited to a wider range of applications. So let's take a quick look at one of those in a typical corridor type application. So on this image on the screen, we can see a lighting design which has been created using the Gen 1 Linear. The results look quite patchy, with a lot of the light being wasted against the wall. You can see the hot spot against the wall there. It also leaves dark areas along the floor as you continue down the corridor. But if we compare that to the same design done exactly the same specifications and size of luminaire, but using the new Linear Gen 2. And this is utilizing an optic which has been specifically designed for corridors. We can see that the floor has a much more even light distribution without too much of that light being wasted against the wall, and a much more uniform illumination going along the ground, free from any dark areas. This is just another view of the same design, looking at it from a kind of a bird's eye view. The two corridors being parallel with each other inside the black rectangle there. And again, straight away, visually, we can see how much better the results are using the new Gen 2 Linear. If we drill down into some of the numbers a bit further, starting with Gen 1, we're getting an average of 35 lux, a minimum of just under 14 lux, and a uniformity of 0.38. So overall, not great, but in comparison with Gen 2, using the equivalent size, we're achieving an average of over 50 lux, a minimum of over 37, and a uniformity of 0.74. So a huge improvement in Gen 2 over Gen 1 there. And this slide really just reinforces that flexibility a bit further, with another demonstration of the new opportunities which Linear Gen 2 can provide with those new optics. This time is handrail lighting. Handrail applications can be notoriously difficult to achieve good results on. Long, narrow space again, which can be difficult to get even illumination with. But much like the corridor example previously, we can see on the image to the right with Gen 2, we're getting a much better uniformity of light using Gen 2 than we are with Gen 1 without those optics present. So again, good example of the type of opportunities which the new luminaire can open up. And lastly, on this section, the performance and the optics can even mean it's possible to utilize a smaller linear product than you might have expected or you might have done previously with Gen 1. So again, here we have two identical designs, this time in a warehouse type application. We're trying to illuminate the aisles between the racking that you can see. On the left is a Gen 1 luminaire, and it's the WL168 size, which is a traditional 4-foot or 2x36 watt fitting. And on the right is a Gen 2 linear, but actually a smaller WL84. So that's equivalent to your traditional 2-foot fitting or a 2x18 watt. Now, side by side, the larger Gen 1 fitting would still have more power or more light output, but in this application, we can see that from the left-hand side of the image, a lot of that light is being wasted against the racking, either side of the aisle, especially towards the top of the racking there. But in contrast, if you look at the right-hand side and the beauty of those new optics on the Gen 2 fittings, you can target that light down onto the ground between the aisle, waste less of the light on the racking at the top, and target the light exactly where we want it. The upshot of this, despite using a smaller linear on the Gen 2 design, is that both are delivering exactly the same performance on the ground. So these are actually providing 57 lux, and that's at a 12-meter mounting height. So moving on now, I want to take a quick look at certification. Obviously an important thing to consider. The new Gen 2 has been certified to the very latest editions of the standards. If anyone is interested, these certificates are available to view and download from the product pages on our website. They're all readily available. And the fact that they've been certified to these latest editions of the standard has allowed us to obtain UKCA certification, obviously mainly relevant for our customers in the UK. If anyone would like to know more about UKCA certification, we actually did a fairly detailed webinar on that earlier this year. Again, that's available to download from our website if that's something of interest, or you can get in touch. I'm happy to send that across to you. But that's just worth bearing in mind. And then I can see we've got quite a few people on today's webinar from the Americas, North and South America. So you'll be pleased to know that the unit is also approved at Class 1 Div 2 as well. But just looking a little further and specifically into the fact that it's certified to the latest editions of the standards, it also means that the Zone 2 variants are certified using the EXEC marking as opposed to the outgoing EXNA. So again, this isn't as relevant for the Class 1 Div 2 side of things, but certainly for products certified for use in the UK and Europe and anywhere that uses the ATEX classification, and EXNA, or sorry, I should say EXEC, is far more stringent protection concept, which other products or manufacturers who may struggle to obtain with older products using an older design. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Just lastly on this section, we've also improved the branding label on Linear Gen 2, so it's purely a cosmetic thing, but we've done this to remove the old adhesive label on the Gen 1 Linear and replace that with a much nicer engraved stainless steel branded plate on the new Gen 2 Linear, so it gives a much more premium feel to the product as well. Now just a quick look at some of the new industrial variants. So with the launch of Linear Gen 2, we've also introduced 2 new brands for Raytec's industrial products. Spartan, which you're all familiar with, will now exclusively be for EX-rated hazardous area products. And then we've introduced Warrior, which will be our new brand for heavy industrial, and Urban, which will be a new brand for standard or less heavy-duty industrial products, which are more focused on efficiency and connectivity. Warrior Linear you can find on our website now. That's available and added to the website, and we'll be releasing more information on the Urban variants in the coming weeks. And just to mention that this branding sort of layout and structure will be rolled out across all Raytec products going forwards. We've done it first with Linear Gen 2, so that's where you'll see it, but you'll see that rolled out across all ranges and products going forwards. We'll just look at the 2 brands in a little bit more detail on what they represent. So Warrior will be our heavy industrial brand and effectively replaces our existing Spartan industrial products. Just to mention that the codes, SPI codes, which you might be familiar with if you're familiar with Raytec products, they will remain unchanged from before. The products will retain all the features and benefits of Spartan, but in a package which is designed for use in a demanding safe area application rather than hazardous area. And Urban will become our brand for standard industrial products, as I mentioned, and this will be an entirely new range. So Urban products will be more focused on the commercial industrial sectors, ideal for applications such as non-EX storage areas and production facilities, and the range will lead the way for Raytec's offering in terms of controls, connectivity, and efficiency. More information will be available on these new Urban Linear variants, like I said, in the coming weeks, but the Warrior ones you can find, as I said, on the website right now. Just a very quick look at the logistics before we move on. A few things to mention, which you may be aware of already, but just to have a quick run through the part codes. So because the Gen 2 version of Linear is a natural evolution of the existing products, all the part codes from the existing variants will be retained for the new Gen 2 variants. We've done this to minimize disruption for any existing projects where previous versions of the product may have been installed, I should say. Packaging, so in terms of packaging, we've ensured the labeling on the exterior of the products are clearly marked Gen 2, so there should be no confusion between Generation 1 and Generation 2 product when they're side by side on a shelf somewhere. And lastly, one change from the existing products, that all Linear Gen 2 products will be painted the same colour. So that's RAL 9006, which is the same colour as our existing Zone 1 variant. And this means that there'll be no colour differentiation between Zone 1, Zone 2, Class 1 Div 2 or industrial products. Obviously there will be some noticeable features, but not in terms of the colour of the housing. We've done this based on the feedback from many of our customers, and long term it will allow us to provide the best possible lead times, but it'll also have the added benefit of making it possible to use certain spare parts across different zone variants. So whereas an existing power supply may have only been possible to use on a Zone 1 variant, now you may be able to use the same one on Zone 1, Zone 2, and so on. And then also just a quick look at legacy products. Again, not too much to mention here, but just to explain that the existing Linear products are now effectively discontinued and have been replaced by the new Generation 2 versions. In terms of spare parts, many of the parts on the Generation 2 version are backwards compatible with the Generation 1 Linear, but for any which aren't, such as those new power supplies which have been redesigned and enhanced, there is a 10-year availability, so we'll continue to support customers who have Generation 1 products in the field for any spares which may be required. So we've now covered all the new features and benefits of Linear Gen 2, and we thought it'd just be worthwhile taking a little step back and looking at some of the key considerations you should be taking into account when specifying any linear product. So some of them we have mentioned already, but just to sort of reinforce that and explore any others which we haven't explained so far. So the first decision that you may need to make is the lighting technology which the linear luminaire uses. Really, your choices here is between a fluorescent linear or an LED linear. This is something we've covered fairly extensively through other bits of content. We have a LED versus fluorescent white paper, which you can see on the screen there, which you can download from our website. But we'll look back just quickly at some of the key findings that we found as part of that study. The first one was that LEDs suffer from far less degradation than a fluorescent does. That means the luminaire will provide better output for a longer period of time. And because the rate of degradation of fluorescence in comparison to LEDs is much higher, the number of maintenance interventions are significantly reduced as well. So you're not having to retube the lamps as you would in a fluorescent, and that could result in big cost savings in terms of maintenance. LEDs are also far better suited to harsh environments and performing better in extreme temperatures. So by design, LEDs are naturally more durable and resistant to vibration. So this is again going to help reduce that level and frequency of maintenance. LEDs will also provide better control of the light output. The directional nature of LEDs mean that more of the light is targeted where it's needed and less that light is wasted. Obviously, that's something we've identified with the new SPARTAN Linear Gen 2 and the use of those secondary optics, which can help to enhance that even further. And finally, the sort of importance of all these factors are multiplied in emergency conditions. And that's because a luminaire will generally only operate a small percentage of its original light output in emergency mode. So if the temperature is really cold or the fluorescent tube is at the end of its life cycle, the level of output could be virtually non-existent when it switches to emergency mode, whereas LED overcomes many of these problems. So really, I think what we're trying to say here is that our recommendation would be that you always, where possible, specify an LED linear over a fluorescent. Of course, the benefits of LED are fairly well understood now, but if you, like I said, if you do want to read into the details and the facts and figures a little more, then you can download the white paper from our website. We'll share the slides around after this as well, so you can access the link which you can see on the screen there. When assessing a luminaire, you should also drill down into some of the product specs or the specifications of the product. So this will help ensure you're This will help ensure you're specifying a luminaire which provides good results once it's been installed, and also that it's going to be suitable for the environment where you're putting it as well. The spec that you need will of course depend on each application and where that luminaire is going, but as a general rule of thumb, we think you should look at the following areas. So you should look at the performance, look at the luminaire's lumen output, its efficacy. Does that stack up against other luminaires that you might be comparing against? Optics, as we've discussed, are there different optics available that allow you to tailor that light output to your specific application, or is there just one standard optic which might be far more limiting? Really, you should take these first 2 points, performance and optics, into consideration together. You can have all the power in the world, but if you're not targeting the light in the right place, that power is totally wasted. So ideally, you need to find a luminaire which fulfills both of these requirements. And what we'd always recommend would be to carry out a lighting design as well, so there's no surprise at the part of installation. And if anyone doesn't know, that's a free of charge service which we can help with at Raytec in terms of lighting design, and we also make all the photometric files for our products widely available if that's something you want to look at yourself as well. And lastly, just to mention as well, durability. So look at things such as the materials which the luminaire is constructed from, look at its IK and IP ratings, temperature ranges too. Ensure that the luminaire meets the demands of that environment where it's going to be installed. And if you're unsure, and if you can't find that information, ask the manufacturer. Can they provide you with supporting evidence to show what testing the luminaire has been through, and to provide you with some evidence that will be suitable for where you intend to install it. Of course, you'll recognise these 3 points from the first half of the presentation that Andy was just that I've been through in terms of the upgrades to Linear Gen 2. Obviously, we've recognised that these are crucial factors to any linear products, we focus on improving these key aspects as part of the upgrades to Linear Gen 2. So if that gives you a bit of context as to the areas where we've looked at for improving Linear Gen 2 as well. If you are replacing old fluorescent fittings, you also need to give close consideration to the new luminaire's dimensions, cable entries, and its fixing centres. So we'll run through each of these one by one. So firstly, the dimensions. The replacement LED linear should be the same size as your existing fluorescent fitting. So traditionally 2 foot and 4 foot sizes. A replacement luminaire of the same size will mean that those existing cables that you might have installed won't have to stretch any further, so they can still be used on a new installation. Fixing centres, so the luminaire should have the same fixing centres as the existing fluorescent 2. These are located in the same position and have the same thread and the same depth as the fluorescent fitting, and the same brackets can be used too. And utilising the same brackets on a job could save you quite a lot of money during the installation. And lastly, the cable entries as well. So having the same size and quantity of cable entries will also mean the same glands can be used, providing they're compliant with the classification of the zone classification of your application. And traditionally there'll be 2 M20 entries, or you might be 3/4 MPT if you're joining us from the Americas, at each end to allow for the through wiring and loop in, loop out setups too. So if you combine all these elements together, what you'll have is a replacement LED luminaire, which is a plug and play replacement, and that's going to reduce the time and the cost of installation compared to a product which hasn't been designed with these features in mind. One of the benefits of an LED luminaire is that it reduces the amount of maintenance interventions which are required, but even still, you shouldn't consider an LED luminaire as being maintenance free, especially if it's installed in a hazardous area. The nature of a hazardous area means that there will always be some routine maintenance required, and it should be an important consideration for any electrical product, but especially when the luminaire is being installed in extreme environments like hazardous area. Access is also often difficult, so maintenance becomes even more of an important consideration. So when you're specifying a linear luminaire as a minimum, you should be asking yourself three key questions as a minimum. We think, firstly, has the luminaire been designed with maintenance in mind? As an example, Raytec SPARTAN Linear features a unique modular design that allows spare parts to be replaced independently and maintenance to be carried out quickly and easily. But that's not necessarily always the case with all linear products. Some may be what we call sealed for life, something we've looked at in a little bit more detail in some other content which you might have seen. And this basically means that the linear is sealed or encapsulated as part of the manufacturing process. And opening up one of these fittings could actually invalidate its hazardous area certification. So with that in mind, you should also consider whether maintenance can be carried out on site or does it need to be returned to the manufacturer for maintenance. If it does need to be returned, that could mean you're left without light for a long time. Whereas in contrast, the ability to maintain a luminaire on site means light can be restored within minutes. So that's an important consideration too. And lastly, you need to check the terms and conditions of the warranty cover, not just the duration of the warranty, but also what components are covered, what processes might have to be followed if the unit fails or a component fails and needs to be returned. So look closely at the terms and conditions, because that could really affect the long-term costs too. And again, find a luminaire which answers these 3 questions positively, and you have a fitting which is easy to maintain and allows for maintenance to be carried out on site. That will prevent any significant downtime, and it should also significantly reduce the long-term costs of owning the luminaire. So as with any project, the initial capital outlay is of course important, but you should also be taking into account the future costs. So ease of maintenance is a really important consideration, which we talk about a lot at Raytec, but we think it's a really important factor to consider when you're specifying a linear luminaire and any hazardous area luminaire for that matter. And if you are specifying a linear luminaire for a project, the chances are that a proportion of them will need to be emergency variants, which are required in the event of, say, a power outage. And there are some additional points relating to emergency variants, which you should therefore take into account. The first 2 are really always a trade-off. So emergency output, i.e. what power or brightness will that luminaire drop to when entering into an emergency mode. And secondly, the duration, i.e. how long will that luminaire provide light for in emergency mode. Generally speaking, the higher the output, the lower the duration will be, and vice versa. Just like if you have a mobile phone with the brightness turned right up, it's going to drain the battery much faster than it would if the brightness was turned right down. So you need an understanding of what emergency duration you need to achieve, and then the more light that the luminaire can provide and you can get while hitting that duration requirement, the better. If you specify a luminaire with a really low emergency output, so say it was 5%, for example, of its standard output, it may mean you need a higher number or a high proportion of emergency fittings on site, and obviously that's going to add and increase the overall costs. At Raytec, our emergency lineaires are available with 25% emergency output as standard, but we can also offer up to 100% emergency output for shorter durations if required, but it is a trade-off between output and duration, but it does give that flexibility to know that you can go higher for shorter durations if it's needed. And other considerations should be whether the luminaire has an automated testing feature. Without it, someone on site is going to have to manually kill the power to test and to ensure the emergency fittings are working correctly. But in contrast, intelligent emergency systems will automatically cycle the batteries to ensure they're at peak health and then communicate those results via an LED indicator, which you can see depicted by the green light at the top of the Spartan Linear on the screen there. And automating this process reduces the reliance on an operator on operator interaction to boost the overall reliability of that emergency system by automating that and ensure it doesn't fail. And lastly, depending on your project, there could be a host of application-specific requirements, and you need to consider A, whether the manufacturer has something which fulfills that requirement in their range currently, or B, if they don't, can they be flexible to work with you, support you, and possibly do something bespoke or custom for you. We'll quickly run through some of the typical things we come across at Raytec. Safety shower luminaires, which you can see on the top image with the green lens. So these variants are installed on around safety showers and designed to guide workers to the safety shower in the event they come into contact with a chemical substance. That green LED output is very easy to identify, and we've actually revamped our safety shower variant with Linear Gen 2 to have a new lens and new optic to ensure it's widely visible from a greater range of angles. Wildlife friendly or turtle friendly variants is something we developed for the Pacific market, and they use special filters to restrict certain wavelengths so turtles don't confuse the luminaires with the light from the moon, which they rely on to make their way back to the sea after nesting. Now, I appreciate if you're installing a linear in a refinery in Scotland, for example, then the chances are you won't be too concerned about this, but I think it's a good example of what we do at Raytec in terms of being able and willing to develop something bespoke to suit the application, whatever it may be. A more common requirement that we see are the use of diffuse lenses, which can help to soften the light, particularly helpful if you're concerned more with the ambience or the general look and feel of the light output rather than simply getting the maximum levels of light on the ground. And this could be something to consider. And likewise, the color temperature of the light. What does the manufacturer offer as standard? Is that right for your application? And if not, do they have other color temperatures available? Again, Spartan Linear luminaires are available 6,500 Kelvin as standard. We also offer 4,000 Kelvin, can generally accommodate others if they're required to. And lastly, I've covered this in the previous slide as well, but you may need special emergency variants where the light output and duration is tailored to your project's needs rather than just the standard 25% or whatever it may be. So that's something to bear in mind too. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today. Hopefully we've given you a good understanding of the new features and benefits of Linear Generation 2. And obviously we talked about some of the opportunities and benefits which we believe that'll bring to you guys and our customers. So hopefully you found that useful. We'll now go to the Q&A. So I'll invite Andy to join us as I have a quick look through your questions. Just while we're waiting for those to come through, so please send them through and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. Andy, we did have a question this morning, which perhaps we could go through again. And the question was just about asking us to explain a little bit more about the different optics which we have available. If you could elaborate on that a little bit, please.
I can indeed. Good afternoon to you all. So yeah, the standard optic variant that comes with the linear fitting is a 120 by 120 circular beam. I suppose in terms of a floodlight, you'd consider that to be like a wide flood. It meets most common applications, and it does a really good job in all of those types of applications. The variations we've got, we can do a tighter, more intense spotlight, so we can do a 90-90, 60-60, and a 30-30. So that's really concentrating the light into a really tight circle. We've also got an elliptical beam option, so we can do what we call an 80-by-30, which is designed for rack lighting. So in one of the slides that Callum showed earlier, you can see how we'd utilize that. We've also got the capability to rotate the optics. So if the fittings run perpendicular to the line of the racking, we can actually rotate the optics. So instead of it being an 80-30, we can do a 30-80. So you don't necessarily have to worry about the fittings going in the same direction as the racking, for argument's sake. We've also got a wide beam optic, which is the one we use in the safety shower. So that pushes nearly all the light sideways, which means you've got really good visibility for the safety shower from a horizontal position. We can also do a street light optic. Obviously, that's fairly straightforward. Throws most of the light down down and forward and a little bit backwards. So you've got obviously classic street light optics, and that pretty much covers it. But again, I have done specials in addition to that. So we have got variations that we can do. So always just please talk to us.
Thanks, Andy. I think it's worth pointing out as well that the photometric files for Linear Gen 2 are available from the website. You won't find the special optics in there as well, but if you have a requirement for that, you believe, obviously we've got the information on the data sheets and on the website. But if you require photometric files, please speak to us, and of course we can help with the light designs too. Another question, Andy, so we've got a couple here from Pankaj, I hope I've said that right, who asks, do the coloured fittings use a coloured filter, or do they use bespoke LEDs? So I guess the question there are probably around the safety shower fittings and also the wildlife friendly unit, if you can tackle that one, Andy.
I can, yeah, thanks for the question. So the safety shower fitting now uses a green light engine, so a green LED array and a green lens. I say that pushes all the light sideways. So instead of it being directional down, safety shower fittings are normally mounted around about anywhere between 1.8 to 2.1 meters. So we've designed it so that the light is visible from very much a horizontal linear plane. The yellow fitting, or the wildlife friendly fitting, is yellow LED, white LEDs, yeah, and that's it's a color 4K light engine with an amber lens. So that gives us a wavelength of about 600 nanometers. Obviously, we've described it as a wildlife friendly fitting. I've also used it in a number of chemical process applications where white light damages the chemicals that are being produced. Again, lots of variations there. We also do a red filter, which is, again, white LEDs, but a red lens. I can't instantly remember the wavelength, but it does give a red light.
Good stuff, thank you, Andy. And another question from Pankaj as well, which is, do you do recessed versions of linear?
Oh, good question. No is the short answer, but watch this space is the longer answer. Again, I've done installations in the UK where there are existing linear fittings, or existing recessed fittings, and it's been too costly for the user to replace replace like for like. So we've installed a linear fitting inside the recessed. But that said, a recessed product is in early stages of design at the minute, and we're looking at releasing that at some point in 2022. But once we've got more information on that, we'll communicate that via the website and our social media platforms.
Great, thank you, Andy. And another one from Richard, who asked, does the range still have a diffuser available that can be retrofitted? Yes,
it does. So we still have the -D and -DD versions for single diffused and double diffused. You can also order those lenses as a spare, but you can retrofit a Gen 2 diffused lens onto a Gen 1 fitting. If that is needed, you would need to let us know. Don't just go and order it. Please let us know first, and we'll make sure we get you the right part. But yeah, all the functionality you had in Generation 1 has been transferred to Gen 2, but with improvements.
Good stuff. I've got one more question here, so I'll ask you that one, Andy, and then just to say if there are any more, please do get them in. We'll try and get round to them. But this question's from Sarah, who asked, can you elaborate on the new product and whether it's and how it's more resistant to chemical attack?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we found with the Generation 1 fitting, and specifically the polycarbonate lens, is that the 10 screw holes were a high stress point. When you got a chemical attack, some of the things we used to come across were a chemical called rig wash, often used in the offshore industry, not very friendly to polycarbonate, and it would attack the high stress point. So you'd get a lot of serious cracking around those screw holes. Now that we've gone to a single, a solid piece of polycarbonate, there's no holes, it's clamped in place by an aluminium ring around the fitting. Because it's a single molded piece, there are no stress points. So a lot of those weaknesses have been eradicated. We do also use a higher grade of polycarbonate now as well. We have soak tested the new lens with a lot of the chemicals that some of our customers had pointed out where we had issues before, and those tests have all come back positive. No effects on the lens, so we're a lot happier with the performance of that moving forward.
Good stuff, thank you. So I think that is all the questions that I've had so far. Andy and myself will stay on for another couple of minutes in case there are any more questions. But that brings us to the end of the webinar today. As I said, hopefully you found this useful, and you can see some advantages and benefits of the new Linear Generation 2. We certainly think it's a good improvement on an already very good product, and we're very proud of it. If you do have any more questions or anything you want to ask offline, please do get in touch. We're happy to try and answer that. As I say that, there's one more question just ask if the presentation will be made available online. So yeah, we will be making the presentation available online. We'll also be sending out a copy of the slides in the next day or two to follow up as well, so watch out for that one. But if that's all for now, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for attending. Good to see so many of you on, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.